with my good friend Terrell J Starr, who I miss. I spent a lot of time with you in the pre-war and then the war when I joined the Ukrainian army, and you went running around all over the place. But now you're back in Ukraine and you're living in Ukraine. Where are you living these days?
All right, first of all, I'm happy to meet you, man. I was happy to be the tour guide for however long you were here, and
You
I
were
learned a
a
lot
tour
from you.
guide.
And I never, we never went through all the photos I took because you went to the War Museum, and
Yeah.
you were pointing out all of the artillery platforms and everything. But it's great. But I'm in downtown Cave right now, and I'm just a walk away from Kudashatik Avenue,
Oh, okay. Oh, you are downtown. I
literally
wonder if you live
downtown.
near Phil Ittner, man. You must down
Yeah,
near the
yeah.
GUM
Actually,
department store.
I actually use the studio, and so I see Phil every couple of weeks at least. So we all are always in contact.
Oh, okay. Great. Yeah, well, if you see me there soon, which has, believe me, over the last 2 years, the my battalion has been begging me to come
Which
on
one?
active
I don't
duty.
remember what you're. Which one were you in exactly?
When you first met me, when I right after the war started and I came back, I was actually working for War as
Oh wow.
in defense intelligence, which is why I was hanging out doing, things
Yeah.
in civilian clothes. Then I went over to First Battalion Legion, which is the infantry battalion, and that's when I went to Kharkiv,
Hmm.
and I was in Kharkiv until uh, August, from April to August, and then I transferred to Third Battalion International Legion, which was the Special Operations Battalion, and
Hmm.
yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah, I
It's
got you.
way too much excitement, and I took part in the Kharkiv counteroffensive and everything, liberated something like 300 villages up there, and took East Kupiansk. In fact, I was forced that took East Kupiansk, and that's where we got our battalion dog whose name is
Oh
Kupiansk.
wow. Okay.
A
Wow.
stray dog
Wow.
was out there. So, and then of course, things sort of settled down into general warfare, and I came back to the United States, as I said. I helped shore up the Eastern Wall of democracy, and I came back to help with the Western Wall of democracy. And apparently, I'm an abject failure. So
We all are,
it's
but
collapsing
well,
back
yeah.
here.
I mean, democracy has always been vulnerable. In fact, yeah, and we both know this. We talk about it a lot. And one of the things that made us such a good team in talking about Ukraine, you're the military guy. I'm the person who
Mm,
does all the area study stuff, and I can put everything in its proper context. And actually, being around you, I learned an immense amount. Just being around military people talking about the military, it actually makes me smarter because when I'm on television shows and we're talking about particular platforms, I basically
mhm.
understand the basics of how to even start and begin those conversations. And most importantly, know when somebody's bullshit. That's one thing, right?
Right, right, right.
Right. Okay, that's another thing. But also just living in this environment. But I did a talk at Tarasov University, and they have the
Mm,
biggest foreign affairs department in the United in all of Ukraine. And
mhm.
the students were asking me, man, like what's going on over there in the United States. And so so I share your thoughts. In fact, I'm going to the same university next Friday, as a matter of fact, because they invited
Mhm.
me to do another talk on some of the same things that we're talking about with a focus on U.S. democracy.
Yeah, great. And I got to tell you something. This is sincerely coming from my heart. I saw no better representative of the United States over there than you in your red and white fur-lined elf coat that you had, where every person in Ukraine, because you could also speak Ukrainian, and every person engaged with you. And I thought, why is this guy not a State Department contract? Right? I mean, pardon me, the old State Department, back before they all lost their minds and
Mine,
destroyed all American engagement globally, right? But
yeah,
having people come to Ukraine, you lived in Ukraine, you lived in Georgia, lived in Russia, and a real expert area expert, and you were fabulous on MSNBC when they had you on before they lost their mind, and
well, first, when I think about what it feels like to be an American over here in Ukraine. And I'm looking at the Trump regime, because I don't call them an
Mm.
administration. The administration would give them
Right.
a certain degree of
Right.
credibility. They are a regime. They are an
Their regime.
authoritarian, totalitarian wannabe regime of individuals who are engaging in an American style of fascism. And I it's tough dealing with the questions that people have of you and of me, because they're saying, Terrell, why don't you all have a Maidan? Because when we as Ukrainians get tired of people, we run to the
Mhm.
streets and we scream and shout, and we just throw the person out and replace them with whoever we like. And if we don't like them, we toss them out. And I said,
Right.
one, ideally, I understand what you're saying, and I would like that too. I would love to just scream and shout at the White House and make these people leave. We have a
Right.
different history, of course, but unfortunately, the people who do that do it in the worst way possible. So it's not a revolution; they're coups.
Right.
And so really, what I explain to people here, and like I talk to the students at Shchechenko University's Foreign Affairs Department, is that
Mhm.
American democracy has always been vulnerable. And look,
Right.
the benefit of talking to you is that we both are black men, and we know that we have people in our family who pay poll tax. We have people
Right.
in our family who, up until roughly 1970, after the Civil Rights Act, the Voter Rights Act, and the Fair Housing Rights Act, we really didn't experience liberal democracy until roughly 1970, after until the ending of Jim Crow.
Right.
And so the problem
Right.
with it is that Americans, we've all, much of America has bought itself into this, have bought into this belief that we didn't have to fight anymore, that we did
Right.
not really have to respect the very fragile institutions that we have, because just up to 55 years ago, there was a significant part of this country that did not want the liberties that we have today. And so when you have Donald Trump uh, just ignoring the courts, right? Because everyone says the courts
Mhm.
can stop us, he's not listening. And
Right.
so, he's not listening to him. And so we always think the courts can save us. And so going back to Ukraine, people are saying, Terrell, what
Mm.
are you as Americans doing about this? Why aren't you going to the streets and screaming and shouting? And I'm telling them in many ways that we are. It's just that you have this homogeny here in Ukraine where you can go, it's a diverse country, of course, and all these other things,
Right.
but generally, relative to America, Ukraine has a particular homogeny where they can unify around a single set of values, whereas in America you don't. Because the main thing that we have to tell people, Malcolm, and I want to get your thoughts on this, there are a lot of people in America who don't want democracy.
Right. Yeah, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it. MAGA is an anti-democratic movement that has tricked itself into believing that true patriotism in the vein of the first American Revolution is to destroy all of the values of that revolution and apply them only to white men, which is technically, it's not the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, right? It's the Virginia Charter of States that you're a white landowner and you have slaves, then you can participate. It's like, did you forget USAID, Destruction of U.S. Agency for International Development, formed by John F. Kennedy as a soft power, a weapon to use American friendship, food, culture, information as a weapon. Literally yesterday, I had some young kid on a Twitter Spaces shout at me, said, "You're a traitor. You went and fought for Ukraine." I was like, "No, I went and fought for freedom." And if you've never heard of this guy, what's his name? I don't know. Marquis de Lafayette, the man who helped save the American Revolution, put the first huge infusion of his own cash, a Frenchman that came to America and fought with the Americans, you would have said, oh, well, he should have been beheaded in the French Revolution. No, he was loved because he fought for freedom. And even the French people, when they rose up against tyranny, and did the full Luigi on the entire ruling class, um, that the Marquis de Lafayette was still honored. We have forgotten those values, right? And so when I get a young black Republican, all right, whose name is Javon Price, okay, who, by the way, who comes up and says, "You're 152 years of military service of your family, all you Nances, you're traitors because you fought for Ukraine." I had to warn him to step aside. I said, "Son," I literally said this on here, "Son, cross the street if you ever see me. And I tweeted, if you ever see, and another bit of advice, if you ever see a black man with a folding chair, run. Okay.
I mean, but who is?
But
But these people don't respect service, right? Like my
they,
parents.
not any,
Oh,
no,
well,
only if white service, yes, right?
okay.
Women, people of
Hmm.
color, gays, lesbian, transgenders, no. You're a military. You know how they worship the armed forces, MAGA, right?
Yeah.
Worship them like we're gods. But it's
And don't
only
serve, and don't
apparently
serve, and don't serve.
no. I don't want to
Right. See, that's that,
serve.
and that's the and Malcolm. That's the whole thing. These people, they're like cowboys, right? And so these are people who go out and they have it's like a facade for them. It's not a real thing, right? And so one of the things you brought up about USAID is me personally because what Kennedy did brilliantly because he also created the Peace Corps,
Peace Corps,
and
right?
as you know, I was in Peace Corps and I did Fulbright, and I'm also a finalist for a Fulbright grant. We will talk about that because my stuff is being
Mm,
impacted by this, right? And so the
right.
whole purpose of South Power is for to develop people like me. You give them language skills, right? Because God forbid you educate
Hmm.
the American public so that they can
Hmm.
understand what in the hell the rest of the world is communicating here, right? And
Right,
so
correct.
what's really destructive about what Trump is doing is that he is making America dumber. And so you need people like yourself who are military, who are in intelligence, but you also need people who are like me, the people who not only have a journalism degree, but people who really understand how to go out into the world and communicate, go out and live there like myself. With Peace Corps, you go out, you do a couple years with the Fulbright, you get your specialist grants, you can do a wide range of things, and then that
Hmm.
is supposed to serve your country as well. And so you have the people who join the military, but for me,
Hmm.
that was the best use of service for my country because I don't feel like I'm just
Hmm.
working as a commentator. I feel like these are the best skills that I have to be able to go to the general public and communicate, particularly as a black man, right? About
Yeah,
what is
yeah,
going on. Because the thing is that when we're at the table, I can look at Iran, I can look at China, I can look at whomever and be like, you know what? You're talking about the racism and all this other shit. Look, I get it. I think you're
right.
here, but I know you are full of shit as well, right? And so there are just there are just ways in which that these grants they equalize the table. That's the main thing. So we are
Right.
able. So I grew up in the inner city of Detroit, Michigan, dirt poor. If it wasn't for these scholarships that paid for my master's degrees, that allowed me to be over here where I was able to meet you, I wouldn't be in these situations. But with USAID, the final thing about it is that tomorrow I'm going to the city of Lviv, which is in Western
Ah,
Ukraine.
love
Another
Lviv.
thing, but another thing that this USAID grants do through the various American embassies is that a part of the soft power is that there's a cultural element to it. So
Right.
you have Amanda Berman, who's a young, early in her 20s poet. She's a laureate. Like it's basically a position of the country's top poet, right?
Right.
And so
Poet laureate. Yeah.
yeah, poet laureate, right? And so Amanda Gorman, roughly, I think she was 20 some years old when she got it, and she read a poem at Joe Biden's inauguration. And
Right. That little
so
girl.
that little girl, right, exactly. And so
Yeah. She's an adult
but
now, obviously.
she's an adult now. You're right, but yeah, right. But basically, what the Ukrainians did, some Ukrainians said, okay, we're going to interpret one of her poems and
Mhm.
we are going to try to build a relationship with Black Americans. And so, one of the best ways through which solidarity is built is through the arts. And so,
Right.
what I see in Ukraine are these very sincere efforts of going and talking to diverse communities. And so, I am going to go to that play. The kicker to this story is that
Mm.
because of Trump's cuts, they cut the funding in order to finance the play. But good for these Ukrainians who said, you know what, this play is so important for what we're trying to do. We're going to continue it anyway. So USAID ID, so much, what a lot of Americans don't know is that when you are the biggest, baddest thing on earth, as a citizen of the country, you have to really understand that my safety and my security is not only invested in military power, it's invested in people having a better understanding of it. You can call it propaganda, you call it whatever it is you want. But if you're an American citizen, you really know that the tax dollars that you're spending, which is an infinitesimal amount of money, far less to what people think that they're actually spending with their my tax dollars, right?
Right.
It's really important for these type of programs to exist because you're helping people like me to become smarter. You're helping young people of color, the Gilman grants that are funded through the State Department, which are in question right now. So there are a whole bunch of young black kids and Latino kids who I wanted to help get scholarships, and I can't really do it at this point because of Trump's
Right.
fuckery, basically.
Right. Well, when white supremacy is apparently an official platform of the government of the United States, purging all reference to minorities, purging all reference to women, gays, transgender, the people that made America. Okay. I mean, it's just utterly amazing.
But
But
I
yeah.
want to get to one
Mhm.
more thing, Malcolm. So you remember the guy
Mm,
it was like the guy who's to date he's the highest ranking officer, not just black officer, but the highest ranking person to get the Medal of Honor.
right.
The,
Right.
right?
Charles
I mean,
Johnson.
I believe Charles Johnson. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
he was injured as he was like filling up he was putting shells into I think a howitzer or something like that, and
Yeah.
he was
Howitzer.
injured multiple times. A howitzer, he kept going, and so this man, not only the highest ranking black person to get a Medal of Honor, the highest ranking officer, period,
Ever. Right.
ever, right? And so you have the unmitigated gall to make folly and to joke about DEI, right? And
Mm.
you know, and to just completely co-opt what it's meant, what it stands for, but to minimize this man's service and what he sacrificed. None of the people who are talking smack about him
Oh.
wouldn't have the gall to sign up for service, let alone do what he did. If I were his family, I would want to go to the White House and smack whoever did it.
Well, let me tell you
Really.
something. I understand exactly how you feel. I've had that done to myself. When I go on Twitter, I have an entire working group, right? They call themselves the Malcolm Nance Working Group, right? To say that I've done nothing in my career and everything I've done was a lie, right? It's like, there's documented history stuff, right? And it's like they will do it for Ukraine. Their answer, which some of them are Russians, these are Vatniks, right, who are working in collusion with the Russian government, which is funny because they featured me on Russian state
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
time was in April when Olga Skabeva called me a sexy, hot soldier of fortune. She didn't say sexy, but she said it that way. And then in September of 2022, during the Kharkiv counteroffensive, they said, aha, this is the NATO officer that is leading the Ukrainians, a black English speaking NATO officer. And I was on TV nonstop for 2 weeks with Soloviev and all these guys pointing to me and as the example. And I have people in the United States go, you were in a hotel room in Poland or a hotel room in Lviv. You never went
Well,
to
I
the
was
war. And
with
it's
you.
like, there's this artillery shooting behind my head. I'm on the freaking zero line in the middle of an offensive. And even the Russian state TV is going, that's an American fighting us in Kharkiv. But you get these people who say, Black achievement means nothing. And in fact, there was a book called Black Expertise by a woman, PhD scholar, about how and her operating philosophy was Black people are never believed until a mediocre white guy validates it. And what do? They sent a guy with nowhere near her qualifications, white guy, to read and review her book to validate it as if they said, oh, we're going to do this exactly the same way. Your experience in Eastern Europe floored me because one thing, I mean, as an intelligence professional, there's one thing I know. I know an effing expert when I see one. I know an expert when I see one. And I don't try to say, ooh, I know as much as him, or I would just glom off of him. I let experts talk. When I don't know Jack, I shut up and I go, see, gentlemen.
Yeah,
And
but we were
that's
good
what I
with
did
that.
when I was over there.
But we were always good with that because again, like I learned from you from
Mm,
a military standpoint. Both my parents served. I learned a lot about.
mm,
Interesting enough, my mother was in Iraq, the first war in
right.
the 90s, and so she was talking about fighting in the desert, which is a whole different thing. So I learned a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
just from her. Right, and about how she said that the sandstorms almost killed her before a bullet did, like all types of stuff,
Right.
right. And so with you, I'm like, okay, this is my opportunity to learn. But I think it's good that we feed off of each other's strengths. So one of the things I'm good with is just coming into the street, understanding culturally how people think and operate. And so that's something that a lot of people don't give to Ukrainians, which
Right.
is you
Hmm.
sit in a you sit, you go, you just walk around and have a camera and people come up and they speak to you. But that is required to really understand what's going on here. And I think that that's really what helps people to miscalculate how Ukrainians are going to respond. And so when the war
Right.
started, I'm like, they're not going. This is not going. They're not going to welcome these people like liberators. That's just not going to happen, right? And I think,
Yeah, of
unfortunately,
course not.
and I think, unfortunately, that with even in the studies in the United States, people are starting to try to catch up, but
Hmm.
everyone's perspective of understanding Ukraine comes from this foundation of Moscow, and that's actually going to hurt your interpretations, and you're going to misinterpret things because this is a completely different group of people with a completely different mentality. And if you haven't been here over the past 10 years or 15 years to see those shifts, but not just to study it, come over for 2 weeks, like me and me here, living here, which is why I do it, because it helps me to really fine tune my thoughts, because these people in the countries and the regions, if you're in the east and the south, are always shifting. And so when I see things with, in the case of Trump saying, okay, we're going to speak to Yulia Tymoshenko and Petro Poroshenko, I'm like, the
Right.
man, the man that Zelensky beat by 75 percentage points to 25 during the first in 2019, and Yulia Tymoshenko, who roughly has a support rating of about 6%. You're going to talk to those people, and
Yes.
yeah, it's just
But
flat out
but Terrell,
impossible.
quick interjection. Because the only thing that they know about them is she has nice braids. Right? And, and somebody else would say, Poroshenko runs all the chocolate stores in that country, right? Russian. And it's like, that's it. Those are our guys.
but the,
They
but
don't look at it as the politics. They go, someone who isn't Zelensky. And as I learned very quickly, that the two leading candidates is alternative. If Zelensky were to say, okay, I'll play your silly game, let's have an election right now, the two leading candidates would be former General
Zelensky.
Zaluzhny, commander of the army who literally spent 3 years devastating the Russian forces, and Kirill Budanov, my former boss, the head of Ukrainian intelligence, would wipe the floor off, and you would get people who are far more lethal to Moscow than anybody.
But they
That's
would,
my
yeah,
guess.
but yeah, that's my guess. It was illusionary. But the thing about it is that Washington, they would not be as diplomatic as Zelensky when it comes to kowtowing to Moscow. Like they just wouldn't do
Right.
it. So they would get the actual reverse. But what I mean, they would be diplomatic. But the point is that they would not get any of the concessions that they're hoping for with the change of government, which
Right.
shows their incompetence, right? And so I actually spoke with people in the streets about what their thoughts were to that, and everyone was saying we don't like a lot of them said we don't like Zelensky, but not Zelensky, I'm sorry, but Zelensky, because one, Zelensky, right. So here's a couple things why he's unpopular. The ban on men between the ages of 18 and 60 or so, yeah, 25, yeah, I think it's 25 now, yeah, to basically leave. They are essentially saying that they really don't like that, and there are a whole bunch of things about the efforts to mobilize, to get men and to recruit. It's
Right.
unpopular. Then there are a number of other issues with that are going on here locally. But they said, you know what? If someone from the outside tried to force us to pick a new president, we would pick Zelensky out of defiance. And so there, no,
Cossacks.
right. They said we would do it out of defiance. In fact, his ratings went up after that White House debacle, because what they were saying
Right.
to me directly was that we can mess with Zelensky, nobody else
You
can.
can't.
You
It's like the
can't.
black community, right? It's
Yeah,
like the black
yeah,
community in the States.
right.
Don't come into our church and tell us what a black person should or should not think. Stay
Right.
outside. We'll negotiate. We'll tell you
We'll
later on what
negotiate,
you should think.
but I'm
Oh gosh.
but it's terrifying because it's really it shows the other incompetence. And it's actually, for me as somebody who cares about national security, it's really terrifying because we are terribly misreading these people. And
Mhm.
so, because ultimately, what you see here is, by the way, this ceasefire. There is no ceasefire. If you went to my
There's
Instagram
no
and my Twitter,
ceasefire. That's
look,
that's an imagination, a
I
figment
I
of their
went
imagination.
I went outside of my I went to my window the other night, and it was
Hmm.
some of the loudest explosions from air defenses working in the Shaheeds.
Yeah,
It
fun
was like
stuff.
a swarm. You heard them
Yeah,
all around, and so you get used to it, and you have to be borderline psychotic because you don't know if they're going to hit you or not. Because
right,
that was the loudest that I have heard the Shaheeds. Now last summer, it was the missile strikes, and so
right.
you've been to my place, so there are the high
Yeah.
rises. So I have the high rises right across the street. They were lighting up like Christmas trees. But the other night when this ceasefire was supposed to happen,
Hmm.
that trust me, I mean, it went on for an hour, and they actually hit a building, and
Hmm.
people died from that. And so I think
Hmm.
that we're looking at a possible Minsk 2.0 happening,
Hmm.
or a potential 3.0, because
Hmm.
these people are not listening. And so I don't these people don't come here. When you heard JD, when Zelensky said, JD Vance, have you come to Ukraine? And he said, no, I looked at videos. Uh, and this guy, and this guy with all of his bravado, Nance, from what I understand of him, he didn't even see the type of combat that I saw when I was here running around in Ukraine. Because from according to the book, from what I understand, he never left the wire.
El Assad Air Base is the largest facility in Iraq. It's huge. It's 23 miles long, I think. It's a big thing. And to shoot at it, you got to aim, you got to get really close, and then you're still going to miss where the base is. You're going to hit the perimeter out there. And he was a journalist for the Eagle and the Sand, I believe was the name of the base newspaper, for not even for a ground combat unit, for the Marine Air Wing, the
Really,
air wing, the pilots. And he was
really.
on the base writing for his base newspaper. And I guess he went out, he managed to talk himself to go out with real Marines one or two times to say that he did that, but he didn't earn a combat action ribbon. I am a Navy chief. I have two combat action ribbons from two separate wars that you
Mhm.
get one per war. JD Vance had zero. But what you and I saw in Ukraine, I'm sorry to tell everybody, that's a war. Okay. Iraq and Afghanistan is us kicking people's asses for a
Yeah,
long
yeah,
period of time and them
yeah.
occasionally shooting back. This is a war. This is World War II. This is I describe it all the ways this way. It's the Ardennes Forest in 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge. Two armies smacking each other in the face. And I learned, by the way, maybe I'm crazy, but I learned very early on when I was out in Kharkiv, when we went forward, to sleep through artillery because it was going to get you. It's going to get you. You just can't deal
Yeah.
with it. You can't let it go. Right. And,
Yeah, yeah.
you may as well, we would play artillery games like counting, like punch bug. So a certain, if regular shells would hit, you were okay, you would count them. And if a strange shell would hit, like thermobaric, you got punched the number of times of regular shells because it's the only way to manage being bombarded for hours on end, right? Is to make a
Hmm.
game out of it. And so what you experience is essentially being a Frenchman in Paris in 1941 through 45, through 44, through the liberation. And I have people here in the United States be like, oh, well, you don't have any experience. Get cruise missiles. Have cruise missiles fly over your head 2, 3, 40, 30, 40 times in a year. You'll get an education.
Do they even know what it sounds like? That's the whole thing, the sound. And it's like, it's so much of this stuff, man. Like, people, they're when I leave Ukraine and as soon as I enter Poland, I feel like there's a weight that just drops from me. So you just the whole reality of adjusting to the environment
Right.
is a whole thing onto itself. And so when you're right now, I didn't go to the front. I'm working to go this summer. But what
Wait. What are you talking about? Ask me anytime. I will have you there in 7 hours. You can go right with my battalion in the International Legion, all English speakers, Americans, and all others, and you can have all the front you want.
Yeah. I'm looking to
I'll,
see it for
I'll,
sure. Yeah, we'll
I'll
talk
send you a
about it.
helmet, though.
I'm looking. Yeah, I do need a helmet, right? I do need a helmet.
You don't have
I got the
armor?
vest.
You don't have.
I have
Okay, you
armor.
got.
I don't have the helmet right now. In
Talk
fact,
to Phil Itner. I think I have a helmet in his house with all my gear.
but the short of it is that people don't really understand just the sounds and just getting used to the psychology of war and like how you're not. It's not only just your mind, but
Right,
your body adjusting to it. And so,
right.
for example, you have to go to sleep. I've slept through many of the missile strikes and drone strikes because if
Right.
it gets you because it's just so random. And so
Mhm.
but what really irks me about JD Vance is like all these people who have all
Mm,
this gusto,
yeah.
they've never gone out. He's not a serious person. None of these people are serious. And
Right.
so because there's a particular type of humility that comes when you experience something like that.
Right.
And I think there was a time when you were here, and I don't know exactly where you were, but me and Andre suited up to be a territorial defense unit, and so
Andre,
I.
who lives 15 kilometers from me now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, Andre. Yeah, Andre. And so basically, our Andre, our friend Andre. So yeah.
Andre.
So, but
Yeah.
basically, we were hit by a Russian missile strike, and the only thing that stopped us
I
from.
remember that
Yeah,
in the first week of the war.
yeah, but the point of it was just pure luck, right? Because
Hmm.
I was usually right in the middle talking with the guys,
Hmm.
just shooting the shit. And we just happened to go back to his place because he forgot something. And then as we were
Hmm.
driving in about 100 meters out, about 150 meters out, we literally saw a Russian fighter jet come down and bomb it. And so we were on the tail end on the blast radius. The only thing that
Right.
stopped it was pure luck. But my point is that you hear people talk about the fidelity of the Russians, and they're not. And these people, we trust that the Russians want a peace accord. But I'm telling you, I live in a civilian area.
Hmm.
I live in a civilian area. All the places that, especially at the start of the war, and even now, these are all civilian locations that are being hit. All these shaheeds that were buzzing around my place, civilians. There's no
Right.
military installments around here. And so you can only conclude that these people are not serious. And it's just something about, Malcolm, white male incompetence. If we don't fight and really figure it out, it's going to be the death of us all.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we would never be able to make these types of mistakes and be this incompetent about a subject
No.
at
Hey,
all.
Terrell. In my career in the military, I did not have the opportunity to fail. Always, and I worked in a world where it was all secrets. You didn't know what was going on behind any door if you weren't cleared to go. It was hen's teeth, literally. I could at one point on all my fingers all the African Americans in my world of cryptology who spoke a foreign language. All three of us.
but
The
him,
rest were
yeah.
maintenance people, but we couldn't be bad at nothing. And the same thing, but you could have Pete Hegseth flunk his way to be the Secretary of Defense, replacing a four-star general who is the epitome of excellence, and say, yeah, the European allies are a bunch of grifters and we should cut them off from all their money. This man runs the Defense Department, but doesn't understand all of our airplanes land in Europe to go to other places. And
Yeah. Hey, Malcolm, I want to get
he
your
doesn't
thoughts
even
on
know
this,
it.
right? Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on this. So you know that there are a number of countries in Europe that are considering canceling their F-35 contracts.
Right. Oh my God.
But check this out. Check this out, right? So they have the Raphael and the Griffin, whatever. But look, I think the F-35 is still it's
Superior to
very
anything.
expensive. It's superior to anything, right? So the F-35 platform is superior to anything. The problem is that just from a business perspective, the Europeans don't trust them, and so there's
Now.
no whole there's now, but there's no whole kill switch dynamic. What happens, as you know, is that the Americans can undermine them by not sending the necessary parts
Yeah, that's the
and
kill
all these
switch
things.
is turning off the resupply.
It's turning off the resupply, but
Mhm.
don't you think that? Raytheon and all these defense contractors are worried right now because here's the thing. They know that the F-35 is a superior jet, but the thing is that the Europeans do have the capacity. It's going to take them more than a decade to develop their own defense infrastructure to where they can
Right.
come up, right? And so from a business standpoint, this is not even smart. And once the Europeans figure out how they can build their own platforms that can be equivalent and not
Mhm.
cost as much, because the F-35 is freaking expensive, right? God knows
Crazy
why he's
expensive.
coming up with it.
And that's why it was
Yeah.
shared amongst 30 different nations that were buying platforms. But now, if you lose five, six, seven nations, here's a kicker: Canada builds three major components, like for the wings and the body, that cannot be built in the United States. So if you're screwing with Canada, you're losing components of that. And of course, you cannot afford to lose customers, because if you lose those customers, 10, 15 orders in Europe, now those platforms, they may take their money back or never pay you, but Lockheed Martin could go under. And you could say, oh, the US Air Force will buy those F-35s. Yes, you could, but you're not making any profit. Your lobbyists aren't getting paid. Your congressmen aren't getting paid off. And MAGA
Right.
will kill the U.S. defense industry, which is funny, since the only thing that MAGA appears to want the defense industry for is to fly B-1 bombers over football games at halftime. That's
but
what
it,
the F-35 is developed for.
but it's what the B yeah, but it's really about what it represents to them, right? So they don't understand
Right,
the security components of it. And so the problem, but the bigger problem with that is that, we really don't talk about the importance of security and what it means to people. We don't really
right.
talk about the importance of NATO. And so the way that I break it down to people is really simple, is that, look, we all agree that the Europeans, like, they need to be more like overall, much of Europe, they need to follow the lead of Poland, right? Because
Mhm.
Poland is taking their self-defense, devoting their GDP to defense in ways that you want the other European nations to do. And so the only, I guess, silver lining, a positive thing that we could take out of this is that the Europeans are being forced to invest more of their GDP,
Right.
because Obama tried to add some nicely, and then you had George W. Bush that tried to add some nicely, and the Europeans are just kind of lollygagging. But I think the main, but I think the problem with the importance of NATO is that, one, you have so many of the people take for granted the fact that our country has not been, that we have not had a war, a ground war,
Mhm.
and they have no idea what that is like and what is required to continue to have that buffer zone between us and the rest of the world, right? And so there are
Right.
larger conversations that we can have about U.S. imperialism, and it's neither why everyone hates us, and we both know we can have those dialogues. But more specifically about the NATO alliance is that, one, you have countries, the Central European and Eastern European countries, that were in themselves, before the Soviets took them on, were westernized in their own rights. And so you have these countries that have a natural orientation to a universal understanding of what defense means. Okay, so that's the
Right.
first, and that's a cultural thing. It's not even military; it's cultural. Okay, and so that's one of the key components of it. But also, if you don't have NATO, which means that it's little things. Okay, where our ships are docked. It also means where is our ability to react. I mean, you're a Navy man. You think those aircraft carriers are just kind of floating around by themselves and don't have permission to dock here and don't have permission to dock there. No, like the reason why we can react with the speed and precision that we do is that we're spread everywhere. That is either a NATO or a NATO adjacent alliance. And so, why wouldn't you want American troops to be in Europe if there was in fact a battle with Russia? Because Russia wants it, and the reason why Russia is so
Mhm.
aggressive is that they're testing NATO's gangster. They want to see, okay, if
Mhm.
Article 5 needs to be pushed, how many of y'all gonna actually show up? And so we got the
Right.
Americans thinking. So I got Trump thinking. We got, Putin says, I got Trump thinking that I'm his boy, I'm his friend, even though I don't care about him at
Right.
all. But he's actually my puppet. He's just too stupid to realize it. But if America doesn't come and get your back, then who's going to show up? Because that's the reason why the Swedes joined. That's the reason why the Finn's joint, and we
Finn's
all know
join,
this.
yeah.
And for a long time, they were neutral. Okay. And so what he's doing is that they're testing Europe because they know that they've been relying on US security and soldiers for all these decades. And so now it's come to a fruition where the Americans, at this particular time, which is why it's so unfortunate that VP Kamala Harris didn't win, is that
Hmm.
this is a very key juncture where the Europeans really need to develop their own independent infrastructure, not just for not just for the sake of NATO, but to really empower themselves and to make their buffer zone stronger. And it's weaker on our behalf because if Russia can get through Europe, they can get to us. People don't get that because we've been so used to being comfortable that we don't think that things can happen to us, and in fact, it can.
We would say this all the time: diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of age, diversity of races, sexes, all contributing equally, right? That's what equity is, right?
Yeah.
Diversity contributing equally because the United States is a country of mutts, right? As Bill Murray described it. And then we included all thoughts, all experiences, all levels and hierarchies together into the philosophy of one team, one fight. And
Mm-hmm.
now Europe is being treated as a DEI or a DEI region, right? We don't want Europe's diversity of language, diversity of culture, diversity of money. We apparently don't like money anymore, which is crazy since we invented global, or let's rephrase that. We took over the global empire trade away from Britain during World War II when we were providing to everyone in the world at the end of this devastating war. And we said, holy cow, we're making boatloads of money in business.
Right.
And now it's like, oh, we don't want to do business anymore except with ourselves. I want to start bartering pigs from my neighbor instead of getting, Lindt chocolate brought over from Belgium. I want one option, Hershey's from Pennsylvania. And it's ridiculous. So we don't want Europe's diversity. We don't want to treat them equally, and we don't want to include them anymore in our reindeer games, as they say in the United States. And it's absolutely mind boggling because the world is our global marketplace. And we have decided we would rather China take over the role of America in the 21st century. Because China's up buying sub Saharan Africa, paying off dictators, building farms everywhere. Instead of them taking hand me down shirts from American charities, it's cheaper and it gives them better dignity in sub Saharan Africa to buy it new from China, where they will exchange it for your food that will be shipped back to China. America's like, well, I hate them Negroes. I don't want to play. I don't want to
Right.
sell them anything. We haven't had this mindset since the I don't even want to say it's an English colonial. It's not even an English colonial mindset. It's just a racist American mindset from the 1920s. That
It
is,
is.
essentially, if you're not in the Ku Klux Klan, I won't do business with you. It's crazy. And it's a hybrid of that and somehow the 1939 America First pro Nazi party in the United States, which is where the original America First came from, a amalgamation of Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan, led by Charles Lindbergh, who held the German American Bund held their rally in Madison Square Garden. I didn't miss that when they held their rally there. That white supremacy is their platform, and they don't care about anyone else's money, including the Canadians, which I don't understand. But that diversity, by the way, is going to come to play if we screw with Greenland, because you're going to see these people are Inuit, and you have people in the United States going, well, the Danes are white people. Why are they even concerned about this place? It's, you know,
Yeah.
Vikings landed 300 years ago. And they're like, well, we would rather not take your money for the F-35 if it means that you don't support our white supremacy platform and give us Greenland. It's mind-boggling. They're treating the world as DEI, the euphemism for the N word.
They are, but I think the main thing when you talk about the money and we don't want it, and here's the thing, right?
The
With
Trump regime, by the way, not the American people, the Trump regime.
the Trump, exactly, the Trump regime. The problem is that what I tell people about this particular Trump regime, one thing that they have going for them is that they appreciate the fact that there is a energy in key European capitals, in Paris, Germany, as far as the far right goes, and so and
Hmm.
then actually the biggest proponent of far right extremism is in Moscow, right? Because they finance it.
Hmm.
They
Right,
finance they
right.
right they finance it, right? And so
I wrote a whole book
and
about it.
yeah, exactly. And so, essentially, what Trump is doing is that is uniting with Russia, uniting with Alternative for Deutschland and
Right.
Germany and Le Pen's party. They're not. She's probably not going to run herself, but she's going to have, I
Her
believe, the deputy.
niece.
Yeah, that's going to run.
Well,
Okay, and
there's a
so
couple of guys. They have that. Yeah, they have that guy who became very populist. But
yeah.
Europe as a body, and having these right wing extremist groups, which were funded by United Russia, and
Yep.
Putin thought that the world was going to shift in Duginism, right? That Moscow would become the central pole of Europe
Hmm.
was just a fantasy. Right up until about 6 weeks ago, the
Hmm.
United States is essentially saying to Moscow, have it. Have it. We're taking North America, and we're going to take Greenland as well, and we're going to split up. We're going to split up these alliances because we don't believe that these markets mean anything. You saw JD Vance's comments yesterday in the strike on Yemen. This is a
Yeah.
goddamn corporal in the Marine, the Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps, and E4, essentially trying to say Europe is a bunch of shiftless losers and our naval power, why should we keep the sea lanes open for them? Well, I don't know. We started it in 1801 with our battles of the Barbary pirates. Apparently, you don't like shipping, and you don't think that trade means anything to America. He was complaining that like 1% of our trade comes through the Babel Mandab waterway, which I've been through a dozen times, and the Suez Canal because that's full of Egyptians, you know. And their only concern was, well, will this affect the Saudis because they got money, and this is about money. But he doesn't seem to understand that the big blue marble is all connected and these streams of money going back and forth. And that he's just like, well, why are we over here? These are, this, that's weird. But you like to drop the damn bombs. You seem to really
Right.
like that part,
Right.
but you don't
Right.
care about the way the world worked until 8 weeks ago. And they live in a bizarre fantasy world and are trying to engineer the right wing takeover of Europe with Elon Musk, who is a real Nazi. Let's be open about that. The man's ideology is not anarchy, is to push the United States into the axis of autocrats, and we're well on our way there. And then staff it with a staff of yes men idiots that anything Donald Trump says is right, but there's that template of the techno bros above that. I don't understand why they don't like Europe. It's like Europe gave us a regulation, so let's destroy Europe. That's a
I don't.
crusader attitude.
But here's the biggest thing, right? Is when you talk about trade, I don't think we don't the media and as a journalist, mainstream media could do a much better job of explaining what trade is and what it means. And so, just as you brought up the point about the three main components of the F-35 being made in Canada, a lot of our elected officials don't do a good job of talking about the consequences of what this means, particularly on the Democratic side. So, for example, I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and
Hmm.
Ontario, the province of Ontario is close to
Hmm.
Detroit. You can drive over and the
Right.
Ambassadorial Bridge,
Ambassador Bridge.
right, and there's actually more trade that goes between on that bridge than between say the United States and all of Japan, and
Right.
so I mean there's just billions
Hmm.
of dollars that go across that border, And the Doug, I think his name is
Doug
Doug
Ford.
Ford. Yeah, Doug Ford,
Yeah, the premier
the
of
premier.
Ontario.
The premier said, okay, here's how this is going to work. You continue with these tariffs. There are 1.8 million households in New York and Michigan. He named another state, and he said that
Mhm.
we'll
Minnesota.
add,
Yeah.
Minnesota, exactly. He said we're going to add about a 20 to 25% tax on your bill. You keep
Hmm.
going, we're just going to shut it off. My first thing is, I called my godmother in Detroit and I said, listen, do you have an echo flow? Do you have an alternative source of energy? Check to
Right.
see where your power comes from. I'm in Ukraine. I'm used to going without electricity, even though
Right.
it's been pretty good now. But again, this is something very basic. We don't think people can mess with us. That's the
Hmm.
problem. We're not used to being screwed with. Okay, let's just sit with that. We're not used to it. I'm telling you, Malcolm. When people pay their bill, when
Hmm.
they know they paid their bill, and then the electricity still doesn't work. People are going to lose their minds. They're
Yep.
not going to
Same
know.
thing with Social Security. I mean, they just last week they floated the idea of there being major interruptions to Social Security. The head of Department of Commerce, right, Lutnick, goes, well, my mother-in-law wouldn't miss a Social Security check or two. She wouldn't go crazy.
He's a
She's the
billionaire, isn't he?
mother-in-law of a billionaire.
Right,
You
right.
know, you think she's going to miss $1,100, but there's never been a billionaire in the United States that turned down their Social Security checks at 65. They've all filed for it. But as you were saying, the United States lives in this weird bubble of plenty, and nothing will ever happen to them. One thing about the Canadian electricity, it's subsidized. They could raise it 60% to make it even for what it actually should cost the United States. They heavily discount that power that comes to New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. And they could devastate. By the way, that power doesn't just come to those states, it daisy chains down into the South. Canadian power from Michigan goes all the way to Texas in their cheesy, disgusting, destroyed 19th century electrical grid that collapses all the time in summer,
Yeah.
right? So everyone
Mhm.
going from Michigan to Texas is getting 25%.
But
But
above
that
all,
being said,
Malcolm,
mhm,
yeah, Malcolm, another thing too is that again, we really need to educate people. It's talking about, for example, when people talk
yes, we
about
do.
drilling, it's America, a lot of people don't know is that Canada sends us heavy crude,
Right,
and for our refineries, and our refineries are designed for light crude. And
right,
so the way that, and this is something very basic, the way that Donald Trump sells it is that, we need to drill. So people make the assumption that today we can just switch to the light crude that's
right.
coming from New
And
Mexico without realizing that it will take years to develop those refineries that we have in the United States to process light crude. But here's
yeah.
the thing, we don't know this because we're just used to things working and things just going as normal and not being disrupted.
See, here's your problem. You want US news media, you want CNN to be CNN International, right? Where they do documentaries and they do, they're more like Al Jazeera. They do documentaries, they give you information. Even the commercials are educational, right? You can just knock that off right now. That's never
Okay,
happening
but
here. If it doesn't have Real
Malcolm,
Housewives of Baghdad,
yeah.
they're
Okay, but Malcolm, here's the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. We can learn that way, or you can learn
yes,
when stuff doesn't
the
work.
hard
Which
way.
one? But why though? Why do we have to learn how? And this is basic stuff that we're talking
Mhm.
about. It's not particularly complex.
Right.
It's just the fact that, and this stupid shit about. Pardon me for the profanity, but dog on it. Like
Yeah.
the way that Trump sells it is, we have a deficit with, with Canada. Look, deficits are not good or bad. Canada is a country of 40 million people. We are a country of 330 million people. Just your basic logic about consumption, okay? Things like this. And if you take away the power that they send,
Hmm.
the quote unquote imbalance, and we shouldn't call it an imbalance because it suggests that one is
Right.
the imbalance goes here and goes there. It's roughly the same as far as trade going back and forth across the border. But I mean, I think
Hmm.
Malcolm, what we really need to really talk about is I think
Mm,
the both of us need to be mindful of the fact that most of the people who come on and they listen to us, they don't have the
mm.
luxury of being able to explore the world in the way that we do. You as a
Right.
military man, and me as somebody who's a journalist that could just literally come to Ukraine and live here and just learn from people. Most people are trying to wake up in the morning at 7 o'clock, go to their hourly job, and go home and go day to day. And and it's unlike here or in Poland, where if you ask somebody the importance of NATO, it doesn't matter if they're a shopkeeper or they're a CEO, they'll be able to articulate that in great detail. And so there's no class division or divide over just having basic knowledge about how the rest of the world impacts them. I find that we are at a severe deficit, which is why these attacks against the Secretary of State and the funding for USAID are just so devastating
Right.
because we spend so much time ratcheting up people's anger about our tax dollars going over here and going over there. First of all, your tax dollars don't pay for everything. That's one thing. Okay,
Right.
let's just get
Hmm.
that straight. Your tax dollars don't pay for everything. Your household budget is not the same as a government budget that can bail out banks and the automotive industry. Okay,
Right.
so I just think Malcolm, both of us in the future, man. Like I can go on lives and we just pick topics and talk about how people can learn just the basics because we are going to get screwed over by by ignorance and white male incompetence, which is why an
Hmm.
idiot would go on Signal and post freaking war plans.
According to the director of the CIA today, it's Joe Biden's fault. I'm not joking. I'm not joking.
I didn't hear
Okay,
that
we've
part.
got it. We're at the end of our hour, but I do have one question that everyone wants to know because I make this now part of all of my inquiries for my Black Man Spy podcast.
Yeah.
Um, so, what's the hot bar in Kiev these days?
Oh man, I go to K41. K41
K40.
is where I go. K41, yeah. And so
Where's that at?
it's on. I think the name of the street. I think it's called Krasilivka. I think that's the
Mhm.
name of the street. But K41, if you say K41, everyone would know what it
Oh
is.
yeah.
I go
All
there
right.
all the time. Like that is a cool spot for me. And so, but yeah, my both seven. But hey, Malcolm, man, look, I want you everybody. Can everyone please go to my my YouTube channel? It's
Absolutely.
yeah. So it's Black Diplomats Official. It's on YouTube, Black Diplomats Official, and so I post weekly videos about what's happening in
Hmm.
Ukraine, but also the rest of the world. But I have interviews, I do feature length reported
Hmm.
stories from Ukraine, from Germany, and elsewhere, and I deal with the intersection of foreign policy and race. And so, if you really want to get a deep understanding of the world beyond kind of like the traditional homogenous white male think tank perspective. So where you can really get it from your own. Black
Hmm.
Diplomats Official is where you can find that, man. But thank
Good,
you, man. You've been
because
great.
Black Diplomats, I've always, one, loved the name.
Thank you.
Two, I learned stuff from you. I mean, it's like take down notes, and
Yeah.
there is a perspective here from Black diplomats and Black expertise, apart from me, me in the intelligence
Mhm.
world. People need to hear. You're a Russian speaker, a Georgian speaker, now Ukrainian speaker. And it's like, who's giving you that perspective? Remember the first time we saw a Black Ukrainian there? You go, they're everywhere. And then guess
Yeah.
what? I started seeing them everywhere
That's
and
true,
running
man.
into them and saying
My
hello to
trainer is
them.
one. My trainer is a Black Ukrainian woman. She's a
Yeah.
champion bodybuilder.
Oh, God. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I get there, we'll all head out to K41. Is the Charles Barker still open? My little speakeasy.
It should, yeah. I think, yeah, they are. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, but Malcolm, man, you
I
definitely
want
should
to
come back over
open
here.
one.
You should,
Well, let
man.
me
And look,
tell you that we're going to get the African no the Congressional Black Caucus. I'm trying to bring a delegation over,
oh man,
and
I got to help post. I got
get
to help
Black
post.
experts to come there. Okay, all right, we'll
I
do
got to
that.
help post.
All right, two things. Love you, man.
Love you
And
too.
two, would you freaking stay safe? You do not have permission to get killed or injured. That's the law. That's an order.
Oh, hey, listen, I'll follow instructions.
All right. All right. Thanks for coming on the live. Follow Black Diplomats Official and follow Terrell Starr's activity. All right.
All right,
We'll
right
see you
on.
there. Go to bed,
Peace.
you.
All right, we'll do.
Bye.
Peace.